Welcome everybody. Thank you guys for joining us here at Howler Bike Park for our 2024 EMTB Shootout presented by Fox Racing and Schwalbe Tires. Today we're going to be looking at a bike that honestly we didn't know anything about, hadn't even heard of until just weeks before the shootout, and that is the Superior EXF 9039B, a 160 mil 29er e-bike coming in at under $6,000, $5,999, with a Bosch Performance CX drive unit and the smart system and a 750 watt-hour battery. Robert, take it away with some of the features and specs.
Yeah, more spec choices that are pretty impressive at this price point. You've got a RockShox suspension package with a Lyric and Super Deluxe in the rear, a Shimano SLX drivetrain mostly, a Shimano Dior brake set, although it doesn't say Dior on them. They are technically Dior's. Nice GT Swiss wheel set, really for the money, quite impressive. Even nice finishing kit from Physique on the saddle.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did swap out on the spec, obviously aside from the Schwalbe Magic Mary tires, because again, Schwalbe is our sponsor, we put the same test tires across all bikes. However, it did come with Schwalbe tires spec'd, but we did change the handlebar and stem on this. Rob, I know you were a big proponent of that. Can you talk on that one?
You know, this year we're trying to make it so that there's no reason for us to call out a small spec change as a reason not to like the bike, that we didn't get on with it, because you know, a couple of $100 on a new cockpit is not the end of the world when you're getting a good deal otherwise, or if the bike's good otherwise. So yeah, we swapped out the narrow and low rise bar and long stem for something a little bit more familiar from One Up components, and yeah, put us in a more comfortable place immediately to start shredding this in.
Absolutely. And speaking about comfortable place, I'd say the geometry on the size large was pretty balanced and neutral overall. You guys can check the loamwolf.com. We will have this bike as an individual review, as well as all the other bikes in our series in a large chart, so you can really get into, you know, the nitty-gritty details and crunch all the numbers. But overall, I'd say most of us, I'm 5'11", you are 6'2". We have two other testers here also helping test, and they're also in the same height range from 5'10" up to 6'2", 6'3"-ish. And we all felt pretty solid on this bike. With that said, let's get out on the trail, see how this bike performs in the dirt, and see if we can answer some questions about just what the Superior is capable of.
Pretty decent all-arounder for the price versus performance. I can't complain too much. It's maybe a little bit heavy for moving around in the air, but nice and compliant on the climbs. It has a lot of traction. Power seems very good with the Bosch system. The cornering, it seems to be well balanced in the geometry. I feel really comfortable on it. I would say that it's a little bit easy to maybe overwhelm the rear end suspension on like repeated high speed hits in a line, but other than that, it's been pretty good all around.
So the EXF 9039B, I barely had to look at the sticker that time. I remembered it pretty well. Still easier than the Giant's naming structure. I actually like this bike, as we said earlier. Yeah. I'd never heard of Superior. Didn't know anything about it until we were approached and had the opportunity to include it in this shootout. The only thing that we changed on the bike, obviously, besides the Schwalbe tires, which are our official test tire for all bikes, was the cockpit. We put our own One Up stem and bar on it. We really didn't get along with what they sent, too narrow and too low. So aside from that, let's kind of get into how the bike fit you, geo-wise, climbing, pedaling, etc.
So this bike fits pretty well geometry-wise. 485 reach, pretty reasonable seat-tube angle, head tube at 64 degrees. There's nothing wild here, but it just feels pretty comfortable to me.
Okay. How about bringing the Bosch motor into it, 750 battery?
Yeah.
Put some power down, long days in the saddle, lots of laps.
Yeah, I think we put this up, you know, a few thousand feet each day and had no issues on battery length. Feels like the Bosch system, again, climbs really well, has a lot of torque, has good power delivery. The ramp up on the torque feels very good. I the back end felt compliant enough to me. Nothing was outstanding, and nothing seemed horrible on it.
Okay.
So climbing torque all day, very comfortable to sit in, pretty comfortable bike. Maybe a little tiny bit of wander in the front end when you're getting up into really steep stuff, but not too bad.
Okay. Sean, any standouts for you in the climbing or fit department?
No, I think it's pretty standard run-of-the-mill, like no outliers on either end. It was just comfortable and did what it was supposed to do, go up the hill.
It is a little bit heavy.
Yeah, but I mean...
But also lighter than some.
It's true. It's kind of, again, kind of middle of the pack.
Yeah, which I guess when you kind of get into, price point bike, that's not a bad place to be. There's no real polarizing numbers, right? From the geometry end to maybe even the spec sort of stuff. It's just, it's a very safe bike all around.
Yep.
And I think that means it's probably a pretty solid option for quite a lot of riders. Componentry, performance, what stood out to you, pros and cons?
I feel like I overwhelmed the lyric maybe a couple times. Just bigger drops and the heavier weight of the bike kind of just bottomed it out a bit. But outside of that, I mean, it's pretty decent. It's got what, SLX drivetrain on it, and it shifted fine most of the time, and the Shimano number brakes did surprisingly well, I think.
They're fine.
I'm a fan of
Yeah.
like the non-family, I guess, Shimano brakes. I think they're actually a big underdog that a lot of people don't give enough credit to. They're powerful, they're reliable, and they work quite well.
I think as long as you're riding within the bike's limits.
Yeah, but I mean, for a 160 bike, those limits are, I would say, pretty high.
Pretty high. I think if you are going to buy this bike, you have to replace the bars. That was the thing that, like, we saw the bars, they were super narrow, they kind of were flat and with a big stem. You just know if you're going to buy this, you're going to probably have to put something that you like on the front.
It does also have 180 mil rotors front and rear.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an oversight, I would say, for the weight of the bike and, of course, how capable it is. I think, a heavier, right, kind of mid upper 50s pound bike with 160 travel, 64-degree head tube, maybe that needs 200 mil rotors, I'd say for sure. The suspension platform, to me, I thought was very smooth.
Downhill.
It was supple. It was lively and active. You know, some of the bikes have a little bit stiffer, right? Like the propane, for me, I thought was like a little bit stiffer, had a little more platform and push into it. This, I thought, was a very lively and supple suspension feel. I think it's a really well-rounded bike. It goes up well, it descends well, not the most playful, I think probably because of the weight. Also, the 485 reach is a hair longer than like what I love at 511, but that's kind of personal preference. A little bit of like nitpick stuff. The battery cover, we kind of had some problems with, like there's like a little, I don't know, keyway kind of lock, and that seems like it kind of like rounded out inside the hole. So there's kind of a little bit bigger of a gap down there on that battery cover, and especially we've had a lot of sloppy conditions, a lot of pressure washing. The bike has never had any issues, but I don't know, just seeing that gap there and knowing that stuff could potentially get in there, and it did rattle a little bit, the plastic cover, so we had to like tape it and get it snugged up again. Could have just been our unit, maybe, and that was just bad luck, but still something we wanted to mention. Where does it sit for you overall, and maybe the ideal rider you would suggest this to?
Yeah, I think this is kind of that everyman's bike, right? Like it's fairly inexpensive for the kind of bikes we're looking at. There's no geometry numbers that are wild that are going to make you uncomfortable either climbing or descending. Spec is pretty good. I think this really could fit a lot of riders and get a lot of people into e-bikes that we're looking at very similar pricing to a reasonably spec'd non-e-bike.
All right, Sean?
I think Nick pretty much nailed it on the head. I think the shredder kind of person is not going to necessarily want something this heavy, but I mean, at the same time, there was never a place on the trail where I felt like the bike was holding me back.
Okay. All right.
What do you think?
Anytime you gotta buy, right, something, even if it is only $6,000, that's still a lot of money. And if you instantly have to start replacing stuff, I don't view that as a great thing. If the bike was like $4,500 and you got to replace some stuff, like I could understand that. But I think $59.99 is enough of a spot where like the spec should be pretty dialed. I just think the width of the bars was just not up to date. The little refinement stuff like the battery cover,
Sure.
you know, there's just a couple of little things, but overall, a very solid bike. Yeah, I think for the rider who maybe isn't super concerned with spec, doesn't have to have the lightest bike, and you know, these geo numbers look like they might be right for your terrain or riding style or height. It's a really solid bike, and one I would certainly recommend, you know, based purely on the riding performance of the bike. Not a brand we know well. They are available at Bikes Online, which I believe has pretty solid customer service. You know, so, you know, obviously you start getting into, again, the conversation of scoring and recommending bikes. Like, I don't know what the warranty situation is going to be truly from a customer. Like, will they fulfill, will they uphold it? But Bikes Online is a reputable dealer. You know, they also sell Polygon bikes, so they've been around, and I would trust that they would take care of people, but that's all stuff that's in the back of the mind, you know, especially when you're out traveling in all sorts of weird places across the country if you have something wrong. But pure performance standpoint, this bike rips. A lot of fun, and I think everybody on the team was very impressed and surprised with how this rode.
Okay, hold up. I'm going to take my chance to add in my 2 cents. Now, these guys filmed their ride impressions of this bike on the second to last day of the e-bike shootout. We'd already spent 6-7 days back-to-back testing the Superior under these 3 guys, but I hadn't had my chance to get on it. I was saving the Superior till the last day, and when I hopped on it, my opinions had slightly changed things as the overall picture for our opinion of this bike on the site.
Oh, okay, this is very sketchy now.
I set the bike up for my 220 pound mass. These guys are 160 to 180 pounds. And obviously that means a lot of extra air pressure in both the fork and the shock, as well as different forces going on. You know, I typically am going to be flexing the bike a little bit more, pushing it that little bit harder, just because of how much heavier I am. And as soon as I hopped onto the Superior with my air pressures, now of course we'd had, you know, 6-7 days back-to-back testing, pressure washing to get the bike clean after being caked in mud. And these things can lead to some wear, you know, seals can dry out, the suspension, the frame pivots can in general become a little bit stickier. But when the bike was inflated to my pressures, I hopped on it, and immediately the feeling of sensitivity and comfort that the other guys had experienced wasn't held the same for me. Certainly off the top it did feel a little bit sticky, and then when I got onto the trail and started properly, you know, dropping in, I just was met with a lack of sensitivity. And now I don't know if that contributed, but there was also a feeling of the rear end of the frame being a little bit on the flexy side too. And just generally, for me, I wasn't that happy. The geometry on the Superior is solid, but the suspension performance just wasn't there, and it led to me certainly not quite sharing the same positive impressions as the rest of the guys.
Stay tuned for the grand finale of the 2024 EMTB Shootout. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out on the rest of the series. Thanks again to all the brands for sending their bikes out. Schwalbe and Fox for hooking us up with quality gear and tires. And of course, Howler Bike Park for hosting us here for an amazing 10 days, I think, of riding, testing, filming, and getting muddy for sure. So thank you guys very much. Leave any comments or questions you have down below, and we'll see you out on the trails.